Hey, welcome to the Mind Hacking Happiness Podcast. I'm Sean Webb. We're here presenting day 11 of the $1,000 Mind Mastery 101 course, which is now free, and you can sign up for it and get access to it indefinitely for $0 at mindhackinghappiness.com. These recordings might be taken down in the future if we start charging for the course again. So go there and also share this with your friends. If you can get 5 of them to mention your name as you sent them on the forums, you are eligible for a drawing of a $100 Amazon gift card. And that's no joke. We might have multiple Amazon gift card giveaways. So get in on that. Every 5 people who mention your name, you get another drawing. You get another shot, or you get another name put in the hat for twice as likely to win the prize. So get that going. Here's day 11. Hey, welcome to day 11 of the 45-day Mind Mastery 101 from Mind Hacking Happiness. I am Sean Webb. I'm wearing another shiny shirt today, and underneath I'm wearing a t-shirt. It's kind of a Van Gogh with a stormtrooper on it. I thought it was pretty cool. So matches the blue of the shirt. I figured, why not? What the heck? Okay, so let's get into day 11 because we're going to be getting right back into giving you some amazing content that you're going to have to digest to understand how your mind works a little bit. But that's exactly what we're going to do today, is tell you a little bit more about how your mind works. And specifically, we're going to talk about your equation of emotion. Now, we started with fundamental truth number 1. You can't control anything without seeing it. So we're going to give you a little bit better perspective into your mind so that you know what to look for so that you can see your mind better. We covered a lot of the basics, but now it's time to dig a little deeper to give you a more granular view of how your mind is doing what it's doing, and so that you can understand what it's giving you on a day-to-day basis, on a moment-to-moment basis, and so that you can see it and understand how to take control of it, okay? Now, from a 50,000-foot view, the activity of your mind, the basic operation of your entire mind, including all its thoughts, emotions, and challenges, is derived from the basic operation of your nervous system. Now, we discussed how the mind isn't completely caused by the brain, but, pretty close, right? Your brain's operation creates much of your mind's activity, okay? So we need to understand a little bit about the nervous system to be able to understand what your mind is doing. It's not completely a subset, but we'll talk about that in a future lesson. But understanding the nervous system will give you a great understanding of how your mind works, all right? So your nervous system, which is inclusive of your brain, is basically nothing but a big comparator. Your nervous system really doesn't do anything but constantly compare one thing to another to be able to get the signals that it needs to create your reality. So, for instance, when your hand tells you something is hot, it's not telling you the actual temperature of the thing that it's touching. It's telling you there's a difference in heat sensing from one moment to the next. So it says, okay, hand was X a second ago, and oh my goodness, it's much hotter now. That's the message that your nervous system is sending to your brain. It's sending a comparison signal. It's not sending you, oh, this stove is 150 degrees, better remove the hand from the heat. No, it is saying, okay, whatever it was a second ago, it's much hotter now, and that's the signal that's being sent by your nervous system, okay? And that's important to understand. When you smell a gas leak in your house, your nose is only letting you know of the difference of the scent from one moment to the next, which is why when you wake up in the middle of the night, or somebody wakes up in the middle of the night and smells gas, and they think that they were dreaming because maybe 10 minutes later they look around and they can't smell the gas anymore and they go back to bed and the gas kills the whole family. That is the nervous system normalizing itself to the new level of gas that it's smelling, okay? It's only measuring from one moment to the next. And so as the moments proceed, the difference in gas is always high. It goes from low to high when the gas leak starts, and then it stays high. And so at that moment of staying high to staying high to staying high, the nose says, okay, there's nothing, I'm not going to tell you about any gas smell because it was It's the same that it was a moment ago, so I'm not going to report it. And that's how people die from gas leaks. So if you smell gas, get out of the house immediately, call the fire department, so that you can save you and your family's life. Because after a few minutes, your nervous system will say, there's no difference between a moment ago and now, and so I don't smell any gas, or I can't report gas to you because there's no difference between the two, because that's all your nervous system is doing, is reporting the difference between two things, okay? So now, again, after a short while, if the gas persists, one gas level is no different from the last, so the nose stops reporting the gas smell, there's nothing new to report, and this is when people die. So the nervous system now, as a next step, creates all your emotions, okay? It's the system that's creating your brain, and your brain creates your emotions, and so your nervous system, with this comparator, creates all your emotions. Let's look at how that's done. Well, true to form, your brain compares two things to create every emotion you ever have had and ever will have. Drum roll, please. These are the two variables that your brain looks at to create every one of your emotions. And again, we hinted at this yesterday or a couple of days ago when we talked about your expectation and or preference about a certain something. That is directly tied to your self map, okay? So we'll wrap all this up with some of the stuff that you learned previously, but one of the two variables that your mind looks at, your brain looks at, to create every one of your emotional responses is your expectation and or preference about any certain something. And the second thing that your mind looks at to create an emotion is your perception, with a little bit of an appraisal process of whether that's good or bad, about that same something. Okay? Now, again, these things are going to tie back to your self map, so all that self-work is going to be really important moving forward. But basically, the equation of emotion takes your expectation or preference about something, typically associated with something on your self map, or basically all the time, and then takes a perception, the trigger of whatever's come in, because your perception is the world around you, things happening, etc., and then something happens, an email comes in, or you see a headline, or somebody says something, or a thought comes in. Your perception of that then gets measured against your expectation or preference of that something. And if there's a balance there, and we'll talk about this in a second, if there's a balance there, it creates a positive emotion. If there's an imbalance there, it creates a negative emotion. If one of the two don't exist, like a perception comes in about something you don't care about, no emotion exists. And then if you have something that you care about and a perception doesn't exist about that something, you still don't have an emotional reaction about it. So it's pretty cool how it all works. We'll get into that in just a minute. But basically, I just wanted to give you the 50,000-foot view of what we're talking about here. So the basic equation of emotion inside your mind is this: your expectation or preference as compared to, I know it looks like a delta, but it's actually a comparison from set theory. So as compared to your perception will then create your emotional reaction associated with that, whatever it is, right? With that thing. There's an expectation about that thing, or a preference about that thing, and then a perception about that thing, whatever it is, equals your emotional reaction about that thing, or about that moment, right? So every emotion you have ever experienced and will ever experience is governed by this one simple equation, because this is exactly how your nervous system works. It does not get any more complex than this, except when it gets more complex than that by piling up multiple equations of emotion. We'll talk about that shortly. That's how complex emotions come to be. Let's not jump ahead, though. Basic operation of the equation of emotion: if the expectation and preference and or preference is equal to or balanced with your perception about something, then you get a positive emotion down there on the lower left. If your expectation or preference and your perception do not balance, if there's a big difference between the two, then you have a negative emotion associated with whatever it is, right? It can be the outcome of a sporting event. It can be the comment that your spouse just made about whatever. It can be the grades on your child's report card. It can be the headline in a newspaper. If your expectation or preference matches the perception, then you have a positive emotion about that thing. If your expectation or preference doesn't match your perception, then you have a negative emotion about that thing, whatever it is. And it is that simple. of an operation within your nervous system to be able to create emotions for you. So, again, this is just another way to visualize it. If the EP and the P are about the same, if both exist, then you have a positive emotion about something. If they're different, then you have a negative emotion about that same whatever it is. So, for instance, if you have an expectation or preference that no bears are coming into your tent, and then you see a bear coming into your tent, that's the time to shit your pants. Just kidding. Sorry. But basically, that's what causes the immense fear, is that when you have an expectation or preference that the bear isn't there, and a perception that a dangerous bear is there and that it could take your life or whatever, that's when the extreme fear kicks in. Holy shit, there's a bear entering the tent. It's just a basic comparison of the two, the expectation or preference about your life and that it be safe, and the expectation or preference or the perception that, my life may not be safe at this moment because there's a friggin' bear coming in to grab my bologna sandwich. Oops. Jump past one. So when you have an expectation or a preference about your favorite team winning the big game, and then you have a perception that they won the big game, then boom, you're happy about the fact that they won the game because you have both an expectation and or perception, and a perception that fills your equation of emotion, and they balance. So boom, you have a positive emotion as a result. When you go out and get that great new electronic gadget, and that gadget meets your expectation or preference with playing with it, then you have a positive emotion about that thing. If you get into the box and find out that it's broken or it's not working to your expectations, then you have a negative emotion and think this thing sucks. So, but you can apply this to anything. If you want a good relationship with your significant other about whatever it is, about maybe even what place to select to go out to dinner, and everything goes well with that, then you have a positive emotion associated with that. If you have an expectation or preference associated with that same moment and it doesn't go how you prefer, then you have a negative emotion associated with that moment or with that situation. This is how every emotional reaction in your life works, period. They do get more complex when this thing piles up, because you can have multiple instances of the equation of emotion pile up at once, which is how complex emotions occur. But from a simple emotional processing standpoint, this is exactly how your nervous system works. There is no other way that it could possibly work, because that's how your physiology is. So now, breaking the EoE to prove that the negative proofs do break it. When we take away an expectation or preference and we have a perception, then that's an incomplete equation of emotion. You will not have an emotional response. So let's say some Canadian high school football team wins its game, and you're not connected with that Canadian high school at all, and you don't care. You learn that they won the game because some guy in a bar says, yeah, whatever, won the game. You have no emotional reaction to that piece of perception, that you now know who won the game, but you have no connection to the high school or the football team, or the fact that, maybe you don't even like football, whatever it is. You will have no emotional reaction connected with that because your equation of emotion is incomplete. Similarly, if you do have an attachment to a certain team, and maybe they even played the game, but you don't know who won, right? You don't have a perception, then you will have no emotional response about the game itself. Now, you could have an expectation or preference that you would love to know the score of that game, and a difference between the perception of not knowing the score. Well, that's a difference that could be driving you crazy, that I don't know the score of the game, but your emotional reaction about the game itself, of who won, will not exist, because you don't know who won or lost. And so you don't have that emotional reaction. You have an anticipation about learning, right, which has to do with wanting to know the score of the game versus not knowing the score of the game. So that's creating an emotion about the anticipation of learning the score that balances. But you don't have an emotional reaction about the game itself because, again, you don't have a perception connected with it. So from this moment forward, you will now be able to ask yourself, with every emotional response you have in your life, what was my expectation or preference of this situation? And what was my perception? I'm going to change that right now in front of you, because it's supposed to say P, not RP. Boom. So what was my expectation or preference about this emotional instance, and what was my perception about this instance that then created my emotional reaction? And again, your EP is going to be associated with something on your self map. But here's the critical awesomeness about this equation of emotion review. And that's what this is called when you actually take a moment to do your equation of emotion review, is that it's a moment of meta-awareness. It's a moment of taking time to say, okay, what's going on in my mind? What's my EP? What's my expectation or preference about this thing that's associated to the thing on my self map? And we'll talk about why that's linked in a little bit. And then second, what's my perception? And what is that doing? That's stopping the negative emotion in progress. It's putting cognition to your emotional process that's being fired. It's saying, I understand you, and it's allowing it to turn off in real time. It's taking a moment of meta-awareness to say, okay, we're going to process this through, we're going to understand it, we're going to hear, we're going to allow the limbic system to be heard, and we're going to let that emotional processing flow through. And that's super powerful. You'll find out it's super powerful as you move through life. Not only will you be able to get your 10 to 20 IQ points back much quicker when your limbic system goes into panic mode, but you'll also be able to handle the small fires during the day of little stuff that bothers you, and you'll be able to put an immediate understanding to it. You'll be able to identify exactly what's going on in your mind at every moment, dump yourself into meta-awareness, and get control of your mind back immediately. This is probably one of the best tools ever in the history of ever regarding being able to take control of your mind, understand your mind, and get control back of your mind. So don't underestimate the power of being able to review your simple equation of emotion, because this is how all your emotions work. Pretty cool. Okay, so the equation of emotion. Is that it? Could it be this simple? Yes and no. Yes, it can be that simple, and no, it can't simply be that simple, because, and again, I apologize because this is an old slide, and I'm going to edit that for you in real time. Boom, boom. So, and I screwed it up. Boom. Oh, that's a separate little dealio. There we go. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? All right, nice. So, yes, it can be that simple, and you will never be able to break your equation of emotion, because that is exactly how it works. Every emotional reaction that you have for the rest of your life, and every emotional reaction that anyone has for the rest of their life, will be explained by this simple equation of emotion that we are learning at this moment. However, it is not that simple, because you can't, with the single instance of the equation of emotion, you cannot explain the dozens of emotions that you have with the one instance. So there's complex emotions that are connected with understanding the equation of emotion. How do we explain variations in severity of emotion? Because we're going to discuss that as well. And how do we explain the complex dozens of emotions that we can have? Now, the good news is the one equation of emotion in its different flavors can explain all of that. It can explain the variations of emotion that you have. It can explain the severity of emotions that you have, and it can explain the complex emotions. We will get into that stuff later on how it does that. So the no is a no with caveats. No, but yes. So is the equation of emotion that simple to be able to explain all my emotional reactions? Yes. Is it just this simple? No, but yes, it is just that simple, except that there are a couple of extra details that we'll talk about regarding emotional severities, regarding the complex emotions that we can have where we're happy and sad and frustrated about one instance, right? We'll talk about that, and the slight variations that can occur in certain circumstances. So we'll talk about this stuff, but it all fits within the equation of emotion model. So your homework for today is quick journaling. So quick journaling is going to be I wish. I want you to write for 10 to 15 minutes to set a timer. Grab a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil and say, I wish, and then boom, you're off and running with your journaling homework. I hope this finds you well. See you tomorrow.